The Denver Broncos preparation for the Cleveland Browns has begun with a walkthrough practice on Tuesday. Plus, we cross it over with Locked On Browns host Jeff Lloyd as we preview this matchup. No Nick Chubb, no Kareem Hunt, but also no inside linebackers that have started the season for the Broncos will be there outside of Justin Sternad. How does this impact everything? We break it down. We preview Thursday's matchup with Jeff Lloyd on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. Both of us, we cover the Denver Broncos for the Locked On Network and 9 News. Make sure you follow and subscribe on your favorite audio podcasting platform, not to mention subscribe on YouTube for daily exclusive Denver Broncos news content and coverage and discussion here. Locked On Broncos. But Sayre, my friend, hey, it's great to see you. We had some outrage over a Broncos mailbag question this week, which is crazy. It's not like you or I were saying, hey, the Broncos should bench Teddy Bridgewater. We just answered a question. And really the answer that we both came up with was, well, nothing's going to change with this Broncos offense until the offense changes itself. I mean, like I said, I feel like we do a great job coming here and trying to provide both sides of the coin here for the Broncos. So we've been accused of hating the Broncos. We've been accused of attacking the Broncos. I simply don't see it. And look, and I've said it here on the podcast, you and I have both said it, Broncos country has every right to feel how they feel about the team's struggles. So we'll decompress that. We'll flush that down the toilet here. The pity potty, it is gone. But look, we got some Broncos news to go over. Obviously official as the Broncos place Alexander Johnson on injured reserve, and they elevated Curtis Robinson, undrafted rookie free agent out of Stanford, as I first reported on Tuesday. And now he's going to get a lot of special teams reps, according to Vic Fangio. But as it pertains to linebacker, an interesting storyline we found out Tuesday about the Cleveland Browns, we'll break down a little bit more in depth with Jeff Lloyd later on, is no Nick Chubb, no Kareem Hunt in this game, and that's huge for the Broncos, but it's also at the same point, the Broncos don't have their 2 starting inside linebackers.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be really, really big for them. They have an opportunity in front of them now, go out and win a starting job from now on type of deal. So it's going to be fascinating to see Justin Sternad wearing that green dot, calling the defensive plays, really in charge of how things are being run out there. And of course, he's got a ton of veterans to help him out. So that's going to be huge. I'm interested to see how Micah Kiser does, a very different type of athlete from Alexander Johnson and obviously Josey Jewell as well. Both of those guys are really more straight line, linear type of athletes. Josey Jewell really wins a lot with anticipation and instincts and being in the right place at the right time. Now you got Justin Sternad and Micah Kiser, who are really more of the high RAS or relative athletic score type of guys. They're better athletes. And then Curtis Robinson coming up behind as well, as you reported, Cody, coming up to that 53-man roster, a big-time athlete. Hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to see Baron Browning, as we alluded to on yesterday's show. But it's going to be a fun matchup for these guys. And Nick Chubb, questionable. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I saw, is on the shelf. Baker Mayfield is in need of potentially surgery. He's going to try to wait till after the season to have that done. So how does that all play into how the Broncos attack him? Are they going to go blitz heavy? Are they going to make him really think things through really quickly and give those linebackers a bit of an advantage? Because we know, Cody, that Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, they can both do damage as receivers as well. So this matchup seems to really be playing into Denver's favor, at least a bit on paper. The Broncos getting some guys back healthy this week. And it's just going to be one of those things where, man, you lose a game like this and it's going to be like, well, the Browns were beaten up and battered and their quarterback even is injured and they didn't have their 2 running backs. And so all the pressure is on Denver right now to come out and really, like we've talked about in previous episodes, they really need to come out and dictate things in this game.
Well, and my guy, Coach Baum, he's a supporter of the show here on Twitter, had even said, like, hey, this is the perfect opportunity for the Broncos to have what we call a get-right game, which, look, you need those. You can't worry about the circumstances necessarily that are affecting other teams, and certainly no other team is going to look at what the Broncos are going through and saying, hey, well, they're dealing with this or dealing with this. Their goal is to try to come in on Thursday night and either beat the Broncos, and the Broncos go in there and beat the Cleveland Browns. So, I mean, that's how you look at it from both sides of the coin. But you did mention health on the player side of things for the Broncos. Vic Fangio had mentioned in Tuesday's press conference, Teddy Bridgewater's got a little bit of a foot issue, and they're continuing to monitor it, and that Teddy's going to tell us exactly how he's feeling. But he's going to be a little concerned if his mobility or lack of mobility is an issue due to the foot injury. So that is a storyline to monitor here for Broncos country this week. Obviously a short turnaround time, just 48 hours away from kickoff against the Cleveland Browns, Thursday Night Football, primetime action, NFL Network, Fox, and even Amazon at 8:20 p.m. Eastern time. That's 6:20 Mountain Time kickoff. Sarah and I are going to have you covered with the post-game report and all that coverage. But Garrett Bowles will start in this game. You look at a variety of the other injuries that Cleveland is dealing with. I know that Jadeveon Clowney's on the injury report. So the Broncos offense needs a better performance this week. The defense needs a better performance this week. How can they get there? Those are the storylines here. But some good news on the injury side of things for the Broncos. Vic said there's still a chance Jerry Jeudy could play on Thursday. You know me, Sayre. I don't want him to play this week. I want him to rest up and wait till the Washington football team game next week. If that is the case for him, if he's going to be fully ready then, don't rush him back now. But good news in the secondary side of things, as Asang Bassi and Duke Dawson are expected to begin practicing soon. Not this week, according to Vic Fangio, but soon. So that's good for them in terms of having some reinforcements, specifically in the nickel and the dime. Is, you know what, the Broncos, the trade deadline's coming up. They might be buyers, they might be sellers somewhere. Something we'll continue to monitor here in the podcast, my friend. But it'll be great to have those guys back in the rotation, because they can contribute, and they showed that last year when they were asked to step into those roles. So obviously a lot of storylines riding on to Thursday's matchup against the Cleveland Browns. The Broncos at a crossroads right now, sitting at 3-3. They're currently the 7th seed right now in the AFC. If the playoffs were to begin today, they'd take on the Buffalo Bills. This is a team that still has a lot of growing to do, and certainly they're hoping to get there. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Both Sayre and myself, we're going to chat with Locked On Browns host Jeff Lloyd for a crossover episode here a little bit early in the week for a preview of Thursday night's matchup. But before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode of the show. That's our good friends over there at Get Upside. And if you're like me and you travel a lot and you have to pay for gas, you have to fill your tank up, why not get a reward for that by using the free Get Upside app, which is available in the Google Play Store or any app store that you use. What Get Upside app allows you to do, you can make cash back when you fill up your tank today, wherever you go, and you can get up to 25 cents per gallon every single time you fill up your tank in cash back alone. And depending on how much you drive, you can make up to potentially $200 to $300 per month in just cash back alone with the Get Upside app today. So after you download the Get Upside app, make sure you use promo code TOUCHDOWN, and you can get an additional 25-cent bonus on your first fill up today when you use the Get Upside app. That is 50 cents per gallon cash back today on your first purchase when you use promo code TOUCHDOWN. You no longer have to pay full price at the gas pump anymore, so take advantage of it. They make it easy for you to cash out by connecting your bank account, your PayPal, or even Amazon gift cards or other brands. They give you access to that as well with the Get Upside app today. So go check it out on your app store. Use promo code TOUCHDOWN for 50 cents per gallon cash back today with the Get Upside app. It is crossover week here at the Locked On NFL Network. Now we have a Thursday night football matchup between the Denver Broncos traveling on the road to take on the Cleveland Browns at the Dog Pound. So we're going to talk it over with Locked On Broncos, myself, Sayre Bedinger, and Locked On Browns host Jeff Lloyd. And Jeff, obviously a lot of history between these two franchises dating decades back. Always great to jump on and talk with you. A short turnaround for both teams this week.
No doubt about it. And look, when you lose, like both teams lost in the fashion they did on Sunday, you'd say, yeah, let's get right back at it. But the Browns are, literally, they are the wounded animal in the corner of the room right now. Obviously, you guys have your own issues with the Broncos. We're going to get to all this in here. But look, I mean, everybody knows they got a Thursday night coming, and it's not like, it was sprung out of nowhere. You got to figure it out. This is the reason, and especially now with the way COVID is, you have these deep practice squads. You got to deep into it. And I know everybody's excited for some John Kelly running the ball for the Browns on Thursday Night Football.
Well, one thing, too, and Andrew Mason, our good friend over there at DNVR, had put out, this is a week where there's going to be no Chubbs, no Bradley Chubb, no Nick Chubb. So the storyline's kind of right itself. So I'm going to open things up right here, Jeff. The first question I have for you, really looking at the Cleveland Browns this season, looking at them offensively, I mean, week one, they take Kansas City to the brink there, have a couple of mistakes that kind of impacted that game. But for the most part, they've looked very good, and obviously with the defense that they have there. But what is the story of this Cleveland Browns team so far at this point of the NFL season here in 2021?
I think, look, injuries have played their part, but there's been inconsistencies, and it certainly comes down to Baker Mayfield. There's times where he's one of the hottest quarterbacks in the game. There's times where if he gets hit once, sacked once, all of a sudden you start to see that 2019 form of Baker Mayfield again, where now, either A, he's trying to do too much, or B, he's seeing things that maybe aren't there. Odell Beckham Jr., had a good day on Sunday, 5 for 70 and change. Had a PFF grade of over 92. He was open all day. And Baker goes through these issues where sometimes it's all focused on Odell and it just doesn't work. And then you get a week like you had, in Los Angeles against the Chargers, where it's, you know what, I get too confused. It doesn't work when I make Odell my first read. And you get a fantastic day that he had that day, 23 of 32. It was probably more like 23, 29. Some late throws in the game were really kind of just throwaways. He's just got to find a way to blend it all together. And this is where my biggest worry is if Jarvis Landry comes back Thursday night, that's just another piece to fit in. And look, Jarvis has always been his guy of all the guys that are here. Rashard Higgins is a good part of his Baker's game as well, but it's always kind of been Jarvis. And now you got Landry. Now you got Odell. And then you have, David Njoku, a player you want to bring into this. Donovan Peoples-Jones. There's the old thing of, they'll figure it all out and be able to feed, every mouth will get fed. It doesn't look like it's working that way right now. And it's crazy to think. And maybe this will be a good thing a little bit where, hey, you're not going to have Kareem. You're not going to have Nick. So basically you're going to run the ball in situations maybe where you're thinking the defense isn't going to expect it. Why don't you just put it on, Baker, and say, look, hopefully we can get our tackles back. We can keep you as clean as possible. Go out there and play quarterback the way you kind of did when you were in Oklahoma.
Absolutely, and that's what the Browns will need, right? No two running backs, no two-headed monster at the running back position. Jeff, I just want to give a quick shout out to the one thing that maybe us and Browns fans can just both kind of get together and appreciate. That's Peyton Hillis. Can we just take a moment to appreciate Peyton Hillis? He's a great guy for both of our squad. But I'm interested. You touched on this quite a bit, Jeff. I was actually going to ask you, without Odell Beckham really stepping into that wide receiver one role, mentioning some of the guys that are going to be, because obviously the two-headed running back monster, Kareem Hunt, and obviously Nick Chubb won't be out there for this game. What do you expect the offense to look like, especially with Baker Mayfield and his injury? How do you kind of expect that to go, especially on a short week?
Look, to say I'm not a little bit nervous, would be an absolute lie. But, we were joking before, Case Keenum and, everybody, what he did with the Vikings in 2017? Cody probably didn't know his wife. My kids were babies at the time. They're teenagers now. It's 2017. It's 5 seasons ago. Look, Baker Mayfield's going to be the quarterback of this team until they have to take the ball out of his cold, dying hands. That's the way it's going to work. This is his team. He is the quarterback. However it goes, it's going to go through him. Does he need a rebound? Yeah. Is it crazy to think he went down, his shoulder popped out twice on Sunday, and he's about to kick it off on Thursday night? Yeah, absolutely seems totally insane. But this is, for me, this is the type of guy you want. Like you hear guys say all the time, I'm going to play till I can't play. That's basically what Baker Mayfield's telling everybody. Does it need to improve? And looking at it, the way it's kind of been, he should be in line for a good week this week. It wasn't a great week against Minnesota. Played really well against the Chargers. Wasn't a good week last week against Arizona. Maybe it turns out it's a good week this week. But look, he's got all the weapons. And look, maybe they're not going to be able to do play action nearly as much because I don't think, Dearness Johnson, I don't think John Kelly's going to scare the living daylights out of anybody on the Denver defense. So they're going to play pass first. So maybe this is going to be one of those where, go more, 4. Go, 2 tight ends, split everybody out. Let Baker play more at a little bit more up-tempo style like he did at Oklahoma. Use the run game as something to lean on where you maybe want to give everybody, a little bit of a rest, chance to catch the breath before amping it right back up. But if you have Odell, and the word was Jarvis, it was trying to gear him up. They weren't going to designate him to return for last week without the thought process if it was more like Thursday. And then look, if he can get through Thursday night, then he gets yet another 10 days. It's more about cutting ability with Jarvis Landry. It's never been about speed. He's never been a speed receiver. It's whether or not he can basically make these cuts that have made him, the solid NFL receiver he is. But if you can go out there and you say you can run sets where it's David Njoku, Austin Hooper, Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Donovan Peoples-Jones, that's a really, really good 5 guys to have out there. A lot of teams in the NFL would kill for it. So I think it sets up nicely. Baker's got to play controlled. He's got to play within himself. And he's got to realize the internal clock, which is what the biggest mistake for him was Sunday, which led to the injuries he's got. Look, it's great that you have some athletic ability, but you extending the play 4 seconds, 5 seconds, you're not Lamar Jackson. There's not the, plan Z option of, okay, now I'll just run for 40 yards down the field because nobody can catch me. Got to play smart. Got to play efficient.
Well, we talked about the offensive side of the ball here for the Cleveland Browns. I want to shift focus now to the defense. Obviously, a big blow not having Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who's now placed on injured reserve. And we liked him over here in the draft process. We call him a piss missile with just how fast and ferocious he is, flying all over the football field. Obviously, you go back to that whole war of attrition analogy there. That's something that we look at here. Obviously, a big blow to that defense. You got Jadeveon Clowney banged up a little bit, but Myles Garrett, he has been impressive. He's looked like a force this season, and he's going to have a really big opportunity to impact this game for the Browns. My question for you two kind of lies on the secondary side of things. How has Greg Newsome and really the secondary here for the Browns, how have they gelled this season under Joe Wood's scheme?
It's taken a little while, and the thing was there wasn't much time over the summer. A lot of guys were injured. Grant Delpit was injured. Greedy Williams was injured over the summer. It took him a while. Then they got into the first couple of weeks. Grant Delpit didn't play week one. Ronnie Harrison got ejected 5 plays into the game. Now you're playing your 4th and 5th safeties, and everybody, oh my God, they're playing prevent defense again. Well, what do you do when you have your 4th and 5th string defensive backs on the field? You're certainly not going to say against the Kansas City Chiefs, all right, we're just man up Tyreek Hill, and you try and beat us. It doesn't work that way. But then you got Grant Delpit, weeks 2, weeks 3, weeks 4. You started to see everything that everybody envisioned of this type of player out of LSU. Now we go to weeks 5 and 6, PFF grades in 20s, both weeks. Everybody, Grant Delpit only played 9 snaps, against the Cardinals. Yeah, and had a grade of 26.2. So if he was out there more, maybe 37-14 would have been a lot uglier. But look, he's a good player. I think the interesting thing about this with the secondary, and there's been some really great moments. Minnesota, they were fantastic. The week before that against the Bears, they were good. Granted, the Bears, at the time had the struggles they do. But now you guys, old friend Malik Jackson spoke today. And Malik Jackson kind of didn't put any names on it, but basically said, it feels to him like maybe some guys aren't as focused as they need to be. And maybe it shows with this secondary play the last 2 weeks. I mean, lack of communication and just not knowing what your assignment is, or knowing that if he didn't do this assignment and I'm a safety, I better make sure I've got the deep half of the field. I can't say, oh, well, I took my guy here, but I'm sorry that, we gave up the 75-yard touchdown to Mike Williams. It doesn't work like that. You got to adjust. You got to realize what other guys are doing. The Christian Kirk touchdown on Sunday against the Cardinals, another example of it. At the time, the corner underneath thought he had help over the top. Certainly didn't. Christian Kirk beat Troy Hill for a touchdown. About 37 yards was about a 3rd and 19, which is egregious in itself. And just even believing that they are way too talented. We are talking about a bunch of 1st-round picks. We are talking about a bunch of 2nd-round picks. We were talking about a player in John Johnson III who's making $11 million, was the highest signed safety in free agency this year. It's inexcusable, really, at this point. Look, I can understand getting beat, but blown coverages, that's inexcusable. And it really makes you wonder if we're shifting players around to spots maybe that they're not getting the reps in. Or maybe like Malik Jackson hinted at today, are people not doing as much homework as they need to be doing?
I think that's spot on how you hit it, because that's kind of sound like what's happened with the Denver Broncos the last couple of weeks. And obviously in a game that there's a lot of explosive players on the field, and if Baker's playing, obviously he's going to throw the ball downfield there. That's something that the Broncos had to find a way to rectify that. But coming up here in just a moment, Broncos country and Dog Pound, we're going to flip the script a little bit. Jeff's going to ask both Sayre and myself some questions pertaining to the Denver Broncos. But before we do that, let me tell you about the 2 sponsors of today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, Lockdown Browns crossover show. It's our good friends over there at McDonald's and Built Bar. And this episode of this Lockdown Broncos, Lockdown Browns crossover is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. And McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends, family, and all of us rivals can get together every single day. So a big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. But, one thing I really like about McDonald's, gentlemen, is in the mornings on Wednesdays, my days off, normally I will go there. I'll get a sausage, egg, McMuffin. I'll get a hash brown. I'll put it on there. And I've had listeners of the show tell me, hey, that is a great idea. So whether you're in the mood for breakfast, they have you covered. Whether you need a McFlurry, the ice cream machine is up and running for you. Or if you just like a burger there, McDonald's has you, and they're the go-to. So make it your go-to on game days for the Browns or for the Denver Broncos. Check it out today. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. We're loving it. But also we're loving Built Bar, ladies and gentlemen, the official sponsor of Lockdown Broncos, Lockdown Browns here once again. And Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar that is out there on the market. And what if I were there to tell you that there is a protein bar out there that doesn't taste exactly like a protein bar, but it tastes like a candy bar? I guarantee you would have interest in it. Not to mention they have a variety of amazing flavors, 9 amazing flavors, including the occasional limited time flavor at Built.com. And this month, specifically at Built Bar, Built is coming out with a brand new limited time flavor every 3 to 4 days. Some of the new ones are blueberry muffin. They have that, or also coconut brownie chunk. They have that sent to my mailbox, so I got that package in the mail. They're pretty tasty. So check their website often, and you don't want to miss out. So go to Built.com, and when you go to checkout, use promo code LOCK15. It's going to get you 15% off your next order at Built.com. Once again, promo code LOCK15 gets you 15% off at Built.com.
As we continue here on Crossover Thursday, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Browns, and again, for myself, Cody, Sayre, we appreciate everybody for making Locked On Broncos, Locked On Browns your first listen day in, day out. As hard as we work, it means the world for us, the return that we get, all the feedback. So again, obviously major props. And for crossover Wednesday, keeping in mind with the Thursday night football game, Cody, crossover Wednesday used to be a thing. And I know Cody and I used to be one of the guys who really, really pushed to make it a crossover Thursday thing, because a lot of these episodes were recorded too early and there was not a lot of info to go off of. Similarly enough, today when I spoke with Cody, well, let's make sure we have some Baker Mayfield news first, so we don't just go out there and throw out a snoozer of an episode. But guys, with the Broncos here, and this is the first thing, and I mentioned to you this, and I kind of gave you a hint on this, and maybe Sayre, you can start here. I look at this, and every team in the NFL, if you don't start the season with the intention of, hey, somehow, some way, who knows, 7 teams, maybe we could sneak into a wild card. You guys. In 3-3, look, a lot of teams are 3-3. There's not much wrong with that, but you're looking at the growth of the Chargers. You look at where the Raiders are. You look at the Chiefs, and all of a sudden, kind of where some Browns fans are thinking too, well, maybe it's getting, late a little early here. But I think I look at this roster, and I'm trying to figure out exactly, where is this team right now? Because I see some things like Von Miller, which is part of the past. You look at Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock. This is certainly maybe the present, not the future of this team. Then you look at, obviously, the first round pick at the cornerback position, some of these young receivers, as far as where the future of this team is. How do you figure this all out here? Because, A, you're trying to contend on the fly, but B, you have some guys here who probably most certainly won't be part of the future, but some young guys that you need to start get acclimated to find out if they are part of the future.
Definitely. I think so many in Broncos country want the future to be right now at the quarterback position. And like you said, Teddy Bridgewater is the present. He's proven that to be the case. The first 3 weeks of the season, man, he beat up on some bad teams pretty good. He was at the top of every list in terms of, you're talking about passer rating, you're talking about efficiency, you're talking about this, that, and the other. He was exactly what the coaching staff kind of pitched him as, to the fan base when he was selected over Drew Lock as the starting quarterback. And the rest of the roster, I would say, is what John Elway would have termed it as win from now on. That was what John Elway said when he was kind of rebuilding, right? So the Broncos have so many pieces on both sides of the ball to build with, guys that are part of the core of the foundation of this team. Justin Simmons signed a big contract. George Payton, the new general manager, has talked frequently about the fact that he sees guys like Cortland Sutton, Bradley Chubb, and others as key core players for the future of this franchise. So the tension with the fan base right now is you have a quarterback who is the quarterback at present, Teddy Bridgewater, and you have all these players that are players that you're going to be building around going forward. So there's a playoff expectation from the fan base every single year, as we talked about before the show. That's just how Broncos fans operate. But then you have a coaching staff, on the other hand, that's really coaching for their jobs. So all these different pieces are in place, in my opinion, for the Broncos to be able to do that. Teddy Bridgewater played really well on a playoff team, the New Orleans Saints, a couple of years ago. And obviously he didn't play his best ball with Carolina last season, but man, he's been the starting quarterback for a couple of really good teams in the NFL in just his short time as a starting quarterback. So that's with the Vikings specifically and the Saints. So the Broncos going into this kind of expected, if you put Teddy Bridgewater, if he wins the starting job, your expectation is playoffs or bust. With Drew Lock, maybe a little bit more lenience there to say, well, you're still kind of hoping and believing that he might become the guy. So maybe playoffs aren't necessarily a necessity at that point. But I would say definitely that's the tension right now, is that you got the quarterback of the present and so many pieces of your roster for the future. And it's led to a 3-3 record. And it does feel like it's past midnight a little bit with Broncos country.
Now, Cody, we had mentioned a little bit here about the Browns defense. And, I had mentioned Malik Jackson's comments here. And I think maybe part of that was, hey, I'm getting it done. Malik McDowell's getting it done. Jadeveon Clowney's getting it done. Myles Garrett's getting it done. We're getting the ball out, guys. We either get the quarterback or getting the ball out, but it's not happening. This Broncos offensive line, how's it been? How's it constructed this year? Is this offensive line ready? And maybe they do get a slight advantage here because, one way to slow down guys who are really, really fast is tell them they got to line up again in about 84 hours and go do it all over again.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Jeff. The issue, I think, with the Broncos offense right now, and, look, I think that there's members of Broncos country collectively throwing blame at one group. I think when you look at the Broncos offensive struggles, it's on Pat Shurmur, it's on Teddy Bridgewater, it's on the offensive line, it's on everybody. It's a collective effort as to what's happened. But, the offensive line this year has kind of been a little bit of a turnstile at several positions on the interior. Graham Glasgow at the beginning of the season, after week 1, had an irregular heartbeat. He had to miss week 2, and then he also missed, I believe, week week 3 with a knee injury. He got rolled up on after that, after coming back. So he's missed some time there. So really just continuity at the interior positions. And then you had Dalton Reisner, who missed 1 week of action with a foot injury, but he returned after a week of sitting on the bench and trying to rest and recover that injury. But for the most part, it just seems like the Broncos offensive line, they've had breakdowns, right? They've had evident breakdowns in terms of one-on-ones and sometimes allowing interior penetration. And when you're playing teams that love to blitz a lot, you have to make sure that your communication is there. There's been a lot of miscommunications on the offensive line, but also I don't want to just blame the offensive line. I think that collective blame is also on the scheme itself. When the Broncos right here, when they don't have a run game going for them and they're trying to run play action, especially with the straight drop back, no rollout play action, but just a straight drop back on a play action, they're faking the handoff. You're having a quarterback who's trying to process the field, but when there's good coverage, he's got nowhere to go. So he's holding on to the ball a little too long there. That's one area where Teddy Bridgewater can improve, in my opinion. But that's where the collective thing is at now, going against pass rushers like Myles Garrett and McDowell, like you mentioned. Malik Jackson, former Denver Broncos, probably going to have a lot riding on this because he hates the Broncos for maybe how they left things in free agency after the Super Bowl with him. It's going to be a big challenge, and in my opinion, probably one of the bigger challenges they've faced so far this season. I think for Broncos country, I think for the Broncos offensive line, what a great way to see if you can respond from Sunday's action where you gave up 3.5 sacks to going through Max Crosby, and you gave up 5 total sacks altogether to that Raiders defense. That is where I'm really kind of seeing where this offensive line is at right now.
Yeah, for me, that was been the first thing here. And, just getting into, usually first when you fire it up is the most recent tape. And, everybody, the Raiders got a really good defensive line. And, I kind of chuckle. Well, I think Cleveland's, sporting a pretty good defensive line themselves. And I think they kind of match up pretty similarly as far as, on the outside, what they can do. And the thing with Clowney is, and I think the one thing I've really enjoyed with him is it's not always about numbers. And, I think he'll never live up to where he was drafted, and that's understandable. But a really smart, heady player, will chase plays down, backside, things you don't, for some of the reputation it seems that people have put upon him, it doesn't seem like that's the type of effort you get out of him. Sayre, let's flip it up here and go defensive side of the ball here. Where were the Broncos as far as running defense? And is this a huge gift for them going into this short week and saying, wow, well, we can take the tape of 24 and 27 and just flush that to maybe the next season or the season after that till we see these two guys again?
The run defense has been a strength of the team all year. The Steelers game being the one exception to that, I would say. Najee Harris kind of was having his way all throughout the game. The Raiders had a couple of chunk plays on the ground, but for the most part, I would say the Broncos' problem hasn't been against the run. Mike Purcell being healthy, Shelby Harris being out there, Draymond Jones getting penetration. The issue in this game, even without your starting 2 running backs in Cleveland, is the fact that now the Broncos are going to be missing both Josie Jewell and Alexander Johnson at the inside linebacker positions. Those 2 guys are tremendous run defenders, guys who always know their gap, always know their assignment, very, very good at blitzing, especially when it comes to blitzing against the run and making plays in the backfield. That's been something that they've been kind of their calling card the past couple of seasons. So it's an interesting deal. We don't really quite know what we're going to get, even against a banged up Browns backfield. You just never know when some running back in the NFL, we know as well as anyone in Denver, running back's kind of a dime a dozen. You put a guy back there and they might go off for 100, 120 yards in a game. So it's going to be fascinating to see how Justin Strnad and Micah Kiser or whoever the Broncos throw out there at inside linebacker really responds in this game to filling those shoes, calling defensive plays, knowing your gaps. That's been, frankly, to me, an area of weakness for Strnad. He's done really well in some pursuit plays. Hasn't been necessarily bad, but I think it's an area that he can improve. So overall, against the run, Broncos are stout on the defensive line. Be interesting to see in this game because none of us have seen what it'll be like without their 2 starters at inside linebacker.
So definitely an interesting matchup as we're basically going to get the JV squad version of the Browns running backs versus the Broncos linebackers. And I think you actually brought up a great point here because, look, whether it could be John Kelly, who was just brought up in the practice squad, or Dearness Johnson, who's barely played, these guys are truly 105, 110%, where everybody else on this field right now, even if they say they feel as good as possible, you're maybe saying, 80 at best. Cody, just real quick one here for you to wrap before we wrap it up here. Obviously, between you and Sayre, you guys brought up a lot of names. Give me a name or two, maybe somebody on the offensive side of the ball, somebody on the defensive side of the ball, that most people don't know about on the Broncos, who maybe have been doing a pretty decent job thus far this season.
Yeah, it's hard to really pinpoint just one guy, but, I'll touch on one guy too. And look, Javonte Williams would be the easy guy to bring up. I'm going to go a wide receiver, though. I think Courtland Sutton, he's a big name. People have talked about him. Tim Patrick has also been very underrated and very productive for the Broncos so far this season. He's really been the most reliable option so far throughout the year. Keep an eye on him. He's a great security blanket for any quarterback. And look, Teddy's dealing with an injury to his foot. He may or may not play in this game. We have no idea just yet, as he was limited in walkthrough. So this is one of those crazy weeks, Jeff, where, it could be Drew Lock, it could be Teddy. We'll have to see, but obviously the mobility part, his foot's going to be a big factor. Defensively, a guy to keep a name on that's been fantastic so far this season. It's going to be Patrick Surtain II, the Broncos' first-round draft selection. He has met every expectation, I think, and has exceeded it. Now, there's areas of his game where he can come up and be better, especially as a tackler. He's missed a couple of tackles, but he's been so great in coverage. He's gotten in phase. He understands the fundamental discipline there, and he's been tested. I mean, they targeted him with Darren Waller a couple times, and Darren Waller only had a total of 18 yards against Patrick Surtain, but he also tested Chase Claypool a couple weeks back against a fellow AFC North Division rival Pittsburgh Steelers team and had perfect coverage on it. And so, he's been very impressive. And if you're a Browns fan watching, keep an eye on number 2 on the Broncos' defensive side of the ball. Thursday Night Football, short week turnaround. Both teams hungry, trying to come off of a loss. I can't wait to obviously break down the action. And if you're a Browns fan, thank you so much for tuning in and hearing the Broncos side. If you're a Broncos fan, thank you so much for listening to what Jeff Lloyd of the Lockdown Browns podcast has had to say. But that will wrap up today's crossover episode, Lockdown Broncos, Lockdown Browns. We have a game on Thursday Night Football. Looking forward to all the action. You can catch it respectively on our shows. And thank you for making Lockdown Broncos and Lockdown Browns your first listen of the day.